Joining me now to discuss is trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Marris. Misty, thank you for joining us. I know you've been all over this. I have so many questions for you about this. I want to begin with the new federal charges Mangione has been charged with: murder through the use of a firearm, 2 stalking charges, and a firearms offense. Were you surprised to learn of the federal charges in addition to the state charges?
Yeah, Kelly, great to be here with you to talk about this case where there's a new twist and turn every day. So all that had been at the time was the state level indictment, which was surprising in itself because it was brought under the highest level charges of first-degree murder in furtherance of an act of terrorism. So that's the state charge. But then just as Mangione was scheduled to appear in a state court, it turns out there was actually a criminal complaint filed on the federal level. So the federal court complaint, a different theory of murder, but really took the priority, at least at that point, for that initial court appearance. Not shocking to see federal charges because of the aspect that's interstate with this case, meaning that he traveled, he stalked Thompson from Atlanta to New York for the purpose of committing murder. That's the federal theory. When you have that interstate aspect, the federal government has the opportunity to charge that type of crime. So it was surprising the way it happened, but not shocked that ultimately federal charges are at play.
And he could also face the death penalty if found guilty on those federal charges. That's very different from the highest penalty he could face if convicted in state court, which would be life in prison without parole. Do you think federal prosecutors will seek the death penalty here?
Certainly, that is a huge game changer. New York has not had the death penalty in many, many years. So as you said, life without possibility of parole, highest penalty that he could get in New York. Now, in the federal murder statute, he is death eligible. So the crime he's been charged with could be death penalty. It's actually up to the Department of Justice to make that determination. And ultimately, the decision lies in the hands of the Attorney General of the United States. Now, Kelly, think about how interesting that is at this particular moment in time where there's about to be a big change at the Department of Justice, given that Donald Trump will be inaugurated on January 20th. So it's likely that the people that are in place at the Department of Justice and his Attorney General will make that decision. Looking back on what we saw from his administration to Joe Biden's administration, Joe Biden had a moratorium on executions, although death penalty was still something federal prosecutors could seek. Donald Trump's administration actually expedited those death penalty executions. And so you see a different mindset there. So it could indicate that we could see the death penalty on the table.
Yeah, interesting to see how politics also plays into all of this. And his lawyer, Mangione's lawyer, told the court on Thursday that overlapping federal and state cases were, quote, confusing and highly unusual. Can you tell us more about how unusual this is?
So I think the lawyers actually felt hoodwinked. And by the way, the local level prosecutors, the New York State prosecutors may have as well, because the federal government, if they come in with an indictment, they do not have to confer with the state level prosecutors in order to do so. So in murder cases, it's generally a state level crime. However, there is Supreme Court precedent that says it's not double jeopardy and it's not violative of a defendant's constitutional rights, because those are two different sovereignties, the federal government and the state government. That being said, both cases are proceeding on very different legal theories. So the standard is, if there was a violation of federal law, the federal government can proceed. If there's a violation of state law, state can proceed, and both can proceed at the same time. Now, in New York, if a federal charge comes first, New York prosecutors generally do not go for that case. They stand down. But here, I think we're going to see a lot of push-pull about which case is going to go forward first. Is it the state level or the federal level charges?
And that video that came in on Thursday, the high security presence around Mangione during his extradition to New York, we were watching it all in the newsroom, pretty much on every screen. It was a much higher level of protection compared to most criminals. It looked like something out of a movie. Why is this?
So it did look like something out of a movie, and at the front of the helm was Eric Adams. And so on one hand, there's a question about whether or not this was to show make a deterrent type of argument, that we are taking this very seriously. In fact, even the mayor of New York City is going to be front and center. The other aspect is, unfortunately, he's quite popular, and he's only been he's been really puffed up by a certain contingent of people. So it's really protecting him from those individuals who may want to get access to him. So there's so many different aspects to it. But I will say, feds don't usually do the perp walk like we saw here. It's usually nondescript black cars on the way to the courthouse. So there was certainly a message being sent with what really ended up being a spectacle.
Right, if anyone wanted to do any sort of kind of copycat situation. And the legal fund for Mangione, that's reached more than $160,000. How significant would you say is the public's role in this case, given the support that they've been showing for Mangione?
It's absolutely unbelievable that there is a legal fund for Mangione, just as an aside, when you're talking about the heinous nature of this crime. Putting that aside, it's certainly an aspect that's going to be analyzed when you're getting into the courtroom, because any prosecutor is going to want to make sure there's not an issue of what's called jury nullification, meaning that you get individuals on that jury who may want to sway the outcome one way or another, not based on what they hear in the courtroom, but based on what they believe about this case, or things outside of the evidence and what's presented. So that's one aspect. They'll be very stringent voir dire. On the flip side, every defendant is presumed innocent until they are proven guilty. And so that other aspect for the defense is getting a fair trial. That means people who can come in, put their own opinions aside. Everyone's going to have heard about this case, but they can focus on the evidence and make a determination on the law. That process, there's going to be a lot of looking at social media. I'll tell you that right now. By jury consultants, there's going to be a lot at play to actually get a jury seated to get a fair trial.
And one of the organizers for that legal fund actually sat down with our Chris Cuomo on Wednesday. Let's listen to some of that and chat on the other side.
Trying to figure out how to use this moment of of popular excitement that has been touched off by, yes, a violent act that I would not advocate for as a tactic if it were up to me, but it happened.
You hear her talk about using this moment of popular excitement. How much of a challenge could it be to find an impartial jury in this case?
Yeah, well, this type of that narrative, there's plenty of room to be critical about the health insurance industry or the insurance industry and not become a vigilante. And so to that point, that's where the electronic footprint of those jurors, and by the way, the defense and prosecutors, they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to research the jurors to see if there is anything out there that may show that the individual may hold an opinion that they could not put aside, and listen to that evidence. So that's where that voir dire process, jury consultant process, deep dives on every single juror that comes into that courtroom, that's going to be very, very important. Keep in mind, we're also talking about the prospect of two trials. A Manhattan County jury, there's going to be different considerations. A federal jury includes Manhattan County, includes New York County, it includes Orange County, Putnam County, Rockland County, and Westchester County. So those are all suburbs outside of New York City. Very different considerations. All will be at issue when getting a jury seated.
Another interesting part about this, as we talked about now, Luigi Mangione and Sean Diddy Combs are in the same prison. Their lawyers are also married to one another. Is that right?
Yes, it sure is. This should be some interesting holiday chatter at the table. Of course, all of that has to be confidential from friends and family members. But yes, now they're collaborating on the case of Mangione, and they're both very, very well-known, very powerful, and very, very good defense lawyers. No surprise that you see them on these cases. The team is going to be an excellent defense team. The evidence looks very, very strong against the defense, but time will tell how that defense shapes up, largely based on whether or not all of the evidence that we've seen play out in the public sphere, what we're seeing that's being reported, actually makes it into that courtroom.
Interesting holiday party in their household this year. Trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Marris, thank you for your time. We always appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.